Welcome to Coyote's Corner. This episode, we'll be listening to Mark Chamberlain tell a contemporary North American tale, The Cricket Story.
The Cricket Story. Once upon a recent time, two good friends were walking down the sidewalk of a very busy city street during rush hour. The noise of the city was everywhere. Car horns honking, people talking, shoes and boots shuffling on the sidewalk. Some people were even yelling at each other, just to be heard over the roar of the city. In the middle of all this, one of the friends turned to the other and said, "I hear a cricket." "No way," her friend said. "How could you possibly hear a cricket among all this busy noise? That sound is just in your head. You probably had too much coffee this morning. Besides, I've never even seen a cricket in the city." "No, I really do hear a cricket. I'll show you." She stopped for a moment and then motioned to her friend to follow as she crossed the street. Luckily, the light was red and the crossing sign was on. Once she got across the street, she walked right over to a big cement pot and then started brushing away the leaves at the bottom of a small tree. And sure enough, there was a little brown cricket. "That's amazing," said her friend. "You must have superhuman hearing. What's the trick?" "Oh, there's no trick. My hearing is just the same as yours." "There's no trick?" her friend questioned for a second time. "Watch, I'll show you." She reached into her pocketbook and pulled out some loose change and casually threw it down on the sidewalk. And to her friend's surprise, suddenly, amid all that loud roar of the city, every person within 30 feet turned their heads to where the sound of money had come from. "See," she said, "it's all a matter of what you are listening for." Now, the main character in this story listened for the beauty and the sounds of nature, even on a busy city street. What are you listening for?
That was Mark Chamberlain telling The Cricket Story. The Cricket Story is originally by Gerry Coutant. Mark found it in the book titled Doorways to the Soul, edited by Elisa Davy Pearmain. Michael Lang sat down with Mark to get some background on that story and see where it came from. We'll listen to that interview now.
Well, thank you, Mark, for sharing that story with us. Where did you originally find this story?
I found this story in a compilation of a book that's a compilation of tales. It's titled Doorway to the Soul, and it was edited by Elisa Davy Pearmain.
So she's the one who collected all these stories and put the book together. Okay.
And I just, was reading through it and picked out a few that I really liked and that spoke to me. And that's how I planned to tell it.
Now, you had seen her perform and you picked up her book, is that correct?
Yes.
And that's what made you read this book, was after seeing her perform.
Yes.
What is it that this story is really about when you tell it?
I think I try to tell it so it's really about the people of today not thinking about what they're doing as they go through their everyday life.
Being so caught up in all the things that have to get done.
Right. I read in newspapers or on the internet or even on the TV news that young people today, mostly because of electronic devices, don't know how to really focus on things like listening to nature or listening to other people, that they're so involved with themselves or their machines, so to speak,
There's a detachment.
Right, they're lacking that skill. And I'm hoping that in telling this story, it makes young adults or young people think about that.
Now, you just learned this story recently. You've told it once prior to coming here.
Yes.
Where do you envision yourself using this story? Do you see it with young adult audiences, like you said, or do you think this is a story that you would use with an audience of children or families as well?
Yes, I think most all stories, I think, can be, through telling or the way it's told, can be adapted to your audience.
Sure, yeah.
And primarily, I think the message is really needed for younger people.
Sure.
But there's older people that, would appreciate just hearing that message again, I think.
Yeah, I think we all can use a reminder to slow down and listen.
Exactly.
As we're going along the road of life. Now, recently, you've been learning a lot more material. You've been with the Seacoast Storytellers for quite a while and have been performing with them as a group, but correct me if I'm wrong, you're starting to look at doing performances that are just you, longer amounts of time, more stories.
Right, and I thought that most of it probably will be personal stories.
Sure.
But even within that context, you can sometimes throw in a moral story or something to support one of your own personal stories.
Right, especially if it's something that has a message that's very important to you, which seems to be the case with this story.
Right.
What is it that's made you decide that you would like to get out and tell more stories on your own?
That's a good question.
That's why I'm asking.
I guess I'm starting to really enjoy the feedback that I get from an audience.
During of that interaction with the audience?
Right.
Oh, okay.
Even both during the telling and after the telling.
When perhaps someone comes up to you and says, hey, that story meant a lot to me.
Right.
Sure, absolutely.
Right. And so I think it's important that if we all in our daily lives went around telling more stories, we would feel more human.
A little more connected to one another.
Right.
Well, thank you, Mark, for sharing that story and for sitting down and talking with us about it, and hopefully made a little more connection.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
That was Michael Lang sitting down with Mark Chamberlain, who just told us the cricket story. If you'd like to hear more from Mark, check out his storyteller page at seacoaststorytellersnh.com. To our listeners out there, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe so you never miss a minute of what's going on here. Until next time, this has been Coyote's Corner.